Hello, I'm Mara Pearl, and this is Novel Conversations. Today, I have some wonderful friends with me, and I'm so excited to introduce you to them. One friend is Tammy L. Grace, who's an American author, as I am, and writes women's fiction, romance, mystery. She has several series. Another friend is Deb Armstrong, who is Canadian, and so she's visiting us from Ontario, and she's a romance author. And then we have Catherine Robertson, who is in New Zealand and writes romance, maybe we would say chick lit in at least in American genres, and we'll dive into that. So, and I'm an author of women's fiction. So we all write in similar veins, and it'll be fun to talk about what's the same and what's different in our approach to what we write. And so to start, I'm going to ask everyone to brag for a moment and just tell us about yourself. So, Tammy, why don't you start?
Oh, hot seat right off the bat. Hi, everybody. I'm Tammy L. Grace, and I am a USA Today best-selling author. Also, I've been really happy to be awarded the Amazon All-Star Author multiple times. So that's made my day several months. I have written now, I think about 45 books, and I primarily write women's fiction. I do write some sweet Christmas romances, and I also write a murder mystery series that has a male protagonist in it. I enjoy all of them, and I'm a huge dog lover, so dogs play a big part in my books, and I include them in all my books, no matter the genre, and really enjoy writing them. The series that I'm going to focus on for our conversation is the one that I have behind me, and it's called the Hometown Harbor series, and it's set in the Pacific Northwest. And I really enjoy writing it. It's like an escape for me. You know, I get to take a little vacation when I write them, and I just love writing that particular series. And I'm super happy to be here to talk with three other authors. It's so fun to be able to communicate since usually we're working alone most of the time. So I'm
Right.
looking forward to a conversation and getting to know everybody and all of you.
Thank you, Tammy. Deb, tell us about you.
My name's Deborah Armstrong. I'm Canadian. I am also a dairy farmer. So my first series, the Davina and Quinn series, uses my dairy farm as the setting for my heroine. So she's a very successful dairy farmer. I write hot and spicy romance for that series, and my other series, The Game Changer, is less sexual. It's more sizzle. And that's a series I'm working on now, trying to get the second book finished. My characters don't always talk to me, so this one's been a slow go.
How dare they?
I know, especially when your hero is the strong silent type and he decides not to talk for a while. So I move on to something else until he's ready to talk.
I see. Okay, thank you. And Catherine, please tell us about you.
Hello, everyone. I am a New Zealand author. My books, up till the last three, have been primarily published in New Zealand and Australia. I started with a series of romantic comedies and moved on to a series about a small coastal New Zealand town that I invented called Gabriel's Bay. And that was just a pure character, women's fiction, just having fun with the community. And then I've been on the periphery of romance writers of New Zealand since 2008, since before the Kindle launched, which is amazing. I think I joined in August 2008 and it came out in November 2008. So I've been lurking on the fringes of the romance society here, and a few years ago decided I would dip my toe in those waters. And I have an agent in London, and she sold my, actually, ironically, American set, but in wine country where I live in New Zealand, so kind of connected. So a romance series to a division of HarperCollins UK. So that's my first proper non-foreign language overseas contract, which is very exciting for me. They are definitely the spicy romance. So there's quite a few sex scenes in it, which was an interesting thing for me. And yeah, and I've been really, really enjoying writing romance and concentrating on the characters and the dialogue, which is the two things that I really love writing about. So lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure. So, since we've already been sort of mentioning sexuality and writing sex scenes, let's talk about sex for a moment. Um, I'll start by sharing a story with you. I write women's fiction, which is distinct from romance in some ways, though there's overlap. So I was on a panel, and everyone else was a romance writer, most of them with Harlequin. And they asked me, how spicy are your books? And I said, it depends on the storyline. And they didn't understand my answer. They said, no, no, but how spicy is your book? And so they then explained that it's very specific in, at least with their contracts, that, and it was even coded on the covers. So if the covers were primarily powder blue, then the sex happened at the end of the hall behind a closed door, and mostly you had to imagine or assume certain things happened. But if there was quite a bit of red on the cover, then you could expect to be in the room while something very romantic was happening. And I said, that's really interesting because my covers have blue and red. So it really did depend in my writing. Some characters are really much more in their heads, and that's not really the focus of their lives. And then for some, the primary thing that they were working on in their lives at that point was how they were going to connect with somebody romantically. So I think, all of us are dealing with this, and we have to find our own voice, something that makes us comfortable and that our readers also enjoy. So, Catherine, where do you find yourself in that sort of spectrum?
This was a learning for me, as they say. And my romance, this is the latest one that came out. And if you can see, it's got a little 4 chili rating.
Oh,
And that
Okay.
means it's very spicy. Although, I mean, romance writers are really picky about this.
Yes.
And my publisher chose the 4 chili rating. And I've had reviewers say, no, no, not even, no, not 4 chilies, maybe 3. So I'm not 100% sure what goes into, I probably should find out, what goes into whether it's wording or the act or the amount of time you spend sort of describing it. I'm not entirely sure what goes into that rating. But yeah, that was a learning for me. I suddenly had 4 chilies, and that was the most exciting thing that most people found about my books.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So, Deb, you have to explain the difference between sexual and sizzle.
Sexual is, they have sex almost every other page or at least every chapter. And it's fairly graphic, very hot, very emotional. Sizzle, there's a slow burn, nothing. Even if they've had a sexual relationship, it's not on the pages. You don't, it, the sizzle didn't, the actual consummation didn't happen till the end of the story. So there's a slow burn between them, and we know that they have the chemistry. We're just waiting for it to finally happen again.
So we might say that's a 1 chili, whereas your other
Definite.
series is 4 chili.
Yeah, so
I
my
think that's so
my one
interesting.
series is definitely a 4,
Mhm.
and the other one is slow burn.
Got it. Interesting. So, Tammy, what about you?
I don't have any sex in my books, so they're all barely a chili, I guess, maybe half a chili. Um, Mine strictly focus on the woman's emotional journey for the most part. Sometimes it's some kind of an emotional problem that she's dealing with, or a physical problem that she's dealing with, or something that changes her life as how she knows it. And so she's, searching for something. But romance plays into it a little bit. I always tell people they have like light romantic elements in them. Romance is a part of her life, but it's not the focus of the story that I'm writing. So many times she'll meet, you know, friends, or she's looking for friendship or family, or what have you. And sometimes she finds a romantic interest, but it's always never on the page. And it's more about the emotional connection that they have.
Kind of leads into my next question, which was about, are your books mostly about romance, or is there a lot of focus on other aspects of a woman's life? And the one series that I'm more familiar with of yours, Tammy, was the Lavender Valley. And I just found the stories to be very tender. And each woman, Tammy goes through, a series of women who are connected through their foster mother, and they each find a profound connection, with a romantic partner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's swoony romantic at times, and I think in a way you don't notice that, gee, where was the sex? At least I wasn't thinking about that. I was going along with you and with them on this emotional journey. Readers like to read different things.
Right.
I'm having an experience now with one pair in my series that somehow every time I write about them, it's just super hot. And I'm like, okay. So much so that I may have to designate that book differently. Like, does this have sexual content? Yep. And I'm a little worried about my readers. I don't really write cozies. I definitely have sexual content in the romantic relationships. But this is for chilies. And that's, as you said, Catherine, that's kind of new for me. And I'm sort of like, I haven't even completely revealed this to my husband yet. Like, how would you feel about this if this were published? So, we'll see. But I think, I don't know if you've ever made a pancake and put too much batter and it just goes right over the edge of the pan. Sometimes I think that's what women's fiction is like in comparison with romance. Romance tends to have a very strict structure.
Mm-hmm.
On page 30, you have to have this, and on page 75, you have to have this. And there's a wonderful discipline about that I admire. But women's fiction just includes a lot more. And I know in my series, my protagonist did not connect with the man she thought she would connect with. So at the end of book one, I have some irritated readers. It's like, well, what's the matter? What happened to Zach?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I'm reflecting more my own experience. I fell in love with someone in my 20s and thought that was it. But when he took off for points unknown, it was like, oh, okay. I had to rethink. And I find that more familiar, maybe more realistic from my perspective. And so my characters are on this journey, and they're dealing with family, they're dealing with siblings, they're dealing with parents, they're dealing with friends, they're dealing with careers, they're dealing with money. And somewhere in that journey, finding the right partner is part of it, but it isn't the sort of the core of what I'm writing about. So would any of you say that there is something you specifically avoid in your stories, or something that you absolutely always include?
That's an interesting question, because I was asked that. I think it's a famous quote, but somebody said, every writer has a bone that they bury again and dig up again and again. And it's their themes that they come back to. And I think rather than avoiding anything, I will be dealing with, even in the romances, which are romantic comedies, so they're funny, they're still dealing with issues of family connection and community connection in particular, and how it is to sort of like the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and how we untangle the ones that aren't true for the betterment of ourselves, for growth. And so I think all those themes have turned up in every single one of my books, being enacted by entirely different characters in different ways.
Oh, I so relate to that. It's sort of Catherine's themes that
Yeah.
are going to emerge in all your stories. And I have those too. I mean, I feel that each of my characters is disentangling their snarls. And
Yeah.
some characters are morally courageous and they take it on as soon as it comes up. And others are masterful at denying, delaying, and you can see the results of those choices through the saga. And I think that must interest me a lot. So I keep coming back to it. What about you, Deb?
There's always an antagonist. There's always somebody, male and female, in my books who are really bad people.
Uh-huh.
And they'll do anything to get to the heroine, but I use whatever comes to my mind that I think will suit the characters, will suit the story. I don't think there's anything I won't add, but I find my books sometimes imitate my life. I write and then it happens in my life, and I think, whoa,
Oh.
Yeah, I
that's
resemble
quite,
that remark.
I wasn't planning for that to happen, but it did. So yeah, my writing and my life very intertwined.
Hmm. Interesting. Tammy?
You know, a little bit like Catherine, I think a lot of my books have some kind of family relationship that impacts the character.
Mhm.
So it might be from a long time ago, or it might be, currently happening. But most of my characters are a little older, I would say 50 and up. So they've had, a pretty full life to draw from and a lot of experience in that life. And that impacts where they are, now and then the choices that they
Mhm.
make. So I think family relationships is a recurring theme. And I know I was talking to some other authors and we were talking and I said, I also think hope is a recurring theme in all of my books. There's always a glimmer of hope. Even there's some topics that are quite tragic, suicides and loss of family and all sorts of things, but there's always hope in them. So I would say those are the two things that I always come back to.
The themes. So, how important is the setting for your respective series? Catherine, you want to start?
Setting for me has always been just such a key part of it. But I can have bigger settings, like so for the Gabriel's Bay series, it's a whole community and it's a whole part of the country. Even if I invented it, it still feels like a big canvas. And whereas a lot of my other sort of women's fiction have been set in a very sort of small, it's like the thing that they said about Jane Austen, it's only a few families and a couple of villages. And so I keep the canvas small for them. So like the setting that everybody might come back to is a cafe or something like that. Or in the romances, it's all set in around a winery. And that is the key setting. And I just use those sort of it's nice to be confined in a small area because in a way you don't have to worry about describing it. Once you've done it, it's done. And then you can concentrate on the characters inhabiting that setting. But the vibe of the setting contributes so much to how the characters are feeling and how they are forced in a way to interact. So I do think very carefully about my settings.
Yeah, I agree. I think it almost is a character, my little town.
Absolutely.
And the research and the care I take, I always say, if I can't say that the bottle brush blooms at the wrong season,
Yeah.
because somebody who goes to the Central Coast will say, no, no, and I don't want them to fall out of the story over an incorrect detail like that. And plus the delight of, in California, we don't have four seasons as dramatically as a lot of other parts of our country, but they are there. And so it's been really fun to say, I figured something out for one of my books, which was that yellow comes first. It's the first color to appear in spring, and pretty soon thereafter, you'll get pinks and purples and things. But it's like, well, my character is a painter, so of course she would be tuned into color in a certain way. So just things like that are very specific to the area where my story takes place. And Deb, you are using your own farm, which is amazing, at least for one of your series, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the details? I love farms, by the way. I find them so nourishing, metaphorically and literally.
Well, because farming, it's a lifestyle
Mhm.
instead of a job. But yes, in that series, I devote one chapter. I give a full tour of the farm because the heroine, she's brought her lover to the farm, or he's shown up, and she said, "Well, I'm going to show you what this is all about." So she takes him through every building, and that's my farm.
Oh, that's very special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he asks questions and she can answer them. So it gives you a feeling that you're actually there. In my other book, it's in one of the books in the series, it's a college town. So I have the college auditorium. I have a small movie theater. I have a bar where all the kids hang out. I have a coffee shop. So I move between them, but I have a fixed idea as how it looks, where the characters sit, and that's my little world there. And another book, it's based in Alberta, so it's in the foothills. It's the characters are always looking at the Rockies, and to me that's a comfort for them, and so I that's the setting I wanted for that book for some reason.
Yeah, sometimes the setting tells you.
Oh yeah, it says, oh, we got to do this in the Rockies. Okay, we'll
Would
do
you
that.
say that there are specific colloquialisms, phrases, special words that come into your series that are kind of connected to the setting?
Well, for one thing, and maybe Catherine finds this, do you write in American English or Canadian British English? You use some Canadian terms that people may not be familiar with. So my first series, I wrote it in American, and then a few readers said, "You're Canadian, why isn't it in Canadian?" So my next series, since it was actual, I wrote in Canadian English, but I had to look up terms because words that we use aren't used in the States.
Yeah.
So a lot of Google searching, what's the word, what's the American term for this? What's the American term for this? And yeah, there's a lot you have to look at for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes it so much richer. I'm sure, Catherine, you're quite international, and you've got your New Zealand home, but you're also connected to the UK, and you also have friends in the US. But my sense is that you are writing from a New Zealand perspective. Is that correct?
I think that's very correct because even in my books that are set overseas, not so much the romance, but I think certainly the first series, there's always a New Zealand character in it. The main character who sort of recurs as a New Zealand character who finds herself in London. My brother lives in London, and I sort of consider it a second home, so I know that very well. We used to live in Marin County for a couple of years, and so the American wine country, Sonoma and Napa, is very familiar. And then, of course, when I moved to Hawke's Bay, I am literally at this moment staring at a vineyard which has just been harvested, which is really rather lovely. But I think also having the experience of living in the different places, you do get it. I mean, I don't know, I think all writers are like this, aren't they? We're observers, we're magpies, we sort of collect things. And so I collect observations about the places, about the language, about the idiom, about how people interact, about what's important to people. But I did, when I decided to set the romance series in America, I did get an American friend to read it.
Mhm.
And she will read them and give me anything, even when I think I've done it right. And like Deb said, you're Googling frantically, but you still can't get it exactly right. So she actually compiled glossaries for me that I have been using to double check when because I'm also published by a British publisher, which doesn't really help. And so I rely on her knowledge to help me get it right.
Oh, that's important. Well, I'm writing a story set in New Zealand based on my
Yay.
recent travels. But when I've got a draft, for sure, I'd like to send it to you because I'm
I
going
would
to ask
love to read
some
it. Thank
that
you.
are wrong. Already, I'm writing it with metric, for example, which is, which is hard for me to think about. And also, let's see, it's winter
Mm.
here where we're just coming out of winter into spring, and you're at the end of summer going
We
into
are
autumn.
just in autumn/fall.
Which is
Yeah,
why the harvest was just done of the
exactly.
vineyard. I thought, huh, the word north. Now, for all of us, it connotes certain things. It connotes something maybe adventurous, colder, maybe more rugged the farther north you go.
Mhm.
And there's also the phrase true north, which means you're on track. And I thought, but north in New Zealand means you're closer to the equator. So everything that we think of as being south would be what you think of as being north.
Yeah, and we call it the tropical far north because it is. It's quite a
Right.
different climate. I
Mm.
know.
Yes. Yes, I found that when we were there. So those are embedded kind
Mhm.
of cultural words. And I think if you want to read, sort of travel virtually, and you want to read, you're an American or a Canadian, you want to read a New Zealand book, you want that reorientation,
Mhm.
towards a different way of thinking. When we were in New Zealand, we were standing outside, and it was the planetary alignment was happening, and so we were all agog looking at the sky. And we had a NASA astronomer there who looked at Orion, and he said, "I've been looking at Orion my whole life, and that's just wrong
It's
because
upside
he's
down,
upside down."
living.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that is something that should never be sort of cleared out
Mhm.
of our fiction. On the contrary, we should cultivate those distinctions and differences and make it all the richer for our readers. So, Tammy, you've got a couple of different settings.
Yeah, and none of them are super exotic like what we're talking about with these lovely ladies. They're all the first series I wrote was this one, the Hometown Harbor series, and it's set in the San Juan Islands, which are off the coast of Washington State. And the idea for this series came to me while I was going to the San Juan Islands. So it was just fresh in my mind and I really love it there. So it's a great place. I do work really hard like you, Mara, and make it authentic and try to make sure it all works. And I have charts of the sunset and where it, when it
Yes.
rises and all this stuff. So I make sure I'm, spot on. And I do get a lot of people that live in the area that read them and they'll write to me and say they just love them because or they used to live there and it feels like they're going home, or people, others have taken trips there because of the book. So I'm like, oh, that's really a neat, thing to know. But they don't have a lot of, I mean, it's not a lot of diversity or anything like that as far as culture or, you know, the stars aren't different or or anything like that. North and south, it all means the same. The other women's fiction I write is set in Southern Oregon, which is another beautiful area of the country. I do a lot in the Pacific Northwest, and we have family there, so I visited there a lot, and I just love that area. And then my mystery is actually set in the Nashville area, and
Oh, right across the country.
Mm.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's a fun, and that one probably has more, little sayings, that they have that aren't always everywhere else, a lot of little Southern sayings and their food and, different things like that. But
Oh yeah, the South
the
is a
South is a little bit
lot of
different.
very specific. Yeah.
So that's a fun one to write.
Well, I mean, you said that it's nothing special, but those regions really are so beautiful.
Oh, gorgeous. Yeah.
Pacific
I just
Northwest.
mean they don't have a lot of, strange words or anything like that that I incorporate anyway, or that I know of.
What would you say are some of the most wonderful aspects of being an author?
That is such, I think, you know, and I am probably speaking for Tammy and Debs and you, Mara, as well, but I think we're driven to do it, aren't we? It's not, in a way, not a choice. It may be our choice as to when we do it, but it's not a choice as to be an author. It's always been in us. And some of us are lucky enough. Like I started quite late. I started in my late 30s and I didn't get published till my early 40s. But I had always wanted to write. I just had other things going on in my life which made it difficult. So yeah, I feel like the best thing about being an author is being able to write, which sounds really simplistic, but the joy of it, the joy of creating characters, the joy of inhabiting other worlds, the joy of being able to express yourself creatively and be satisfied with what you are doing, even if it feels like hell sometimes when you're in the middle of it. But it is a fabulous thing. And I think even if I was, I'm fortunate enough to be able to support myself while doing it, because I certainly don't earn a huge amount of money, but it's yet. And but I think I would do it even if I was sort of like, if it was the only thing in my life, I would still want to write.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah, I hear that.
Well, I started much later in life than Catherine. It was the summer I turned 50, so it's been 15 years. Um, but I think sharing our imagination with other people, and they get to see what we're thinking or read what we're thinking. And I'm always uh, I'm always thrilled when people ask me, how did you come up with that idea? How do you come up with your stories? I could never do that. And I said, you could just give yourself some time. But yeah, to me, that's the best part is being able to share what these silly characters are doing in my brain.
Yeah, yeah. Tammy?
I think for me, I like the freedom of being able to write. I worked my whole career in government, so I waited until I retired to start writing. Growing up, I always wanted to be a novelist. That was just a dream I had, I think. And I never really thought about it as a career. When I went to school and stuff, it wasn't even on my radar. But when I was getting ready to retire, I was like, I really want to try this and see if I can, make it work. So when Catherine said you started late, I'm like, no, you didn't start late. I started late. So I think I retired when I was 46, almost 47, and that's when I started writing. And so I was just very determined to do it because I've always loved books. Books have been like a special thing for me. I was a big nerd throughout school and always reading and always in the library and getting kicked out of the library and all that kind of stuff because I'd been there too long. So books have always been very special. And I thought to be able to create something like that for someone else is quite a treat. It's fun, but at the same time, real rewarding. Like you're saying when somebody says, "Oh wow, I loved your book, and how did you think of that?" And it's like, "Oh, I have so many things I think you won't even believe me if I tell you them all." So I think the freedom, and creating those little worlds that I think I mentioned, it's almost like an escape, when to me, reading is a fun escape. That's why I've always read. It's a fun, way to escape the real world and find a new one and enjoy it. And that's to me what writing is too. You get to create a world with a bunch of characters that you want to spend time with, and I think that's fun.
Yeah, I resemble pieces of what all of you have said. I was a very early reader. I was the youngest citizen in my town when I was a child to have a library book, a library card. And I remember trying to check out a book and the librarian saying, "You can't check that out." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, read a page for me," which I did. And so she said, "Oh, okay." So, and I remember creating a novel with my mommy when I was, like 5. I wrote the story, and then I wanted to have a binding. And so we used yarn and we stitched the binding. And so my book was published as far as I was concerned.
Mhm.
So there was some vision and expectation, of doing that. And then as life rolled along, I did write, but not novels. I became a journalist and I had just a really great career working. I worked for the Financial Times of London. I worked for the Associated Press. I worked for Rolling Stone and some others, and learned a lot of discipline about research and structure from doing that. And then I wrote scripts. I wrote 100 scripts for my BBC radio show, and I wrote some screenplays and so forth. All the while, the novel idea sort of cooking in the back of my head, but I felt that I hadn't lived enough yet to really write what I wanted to write. And then the radio show succeeded, and publishers started approaching me, and that was like, that's my cue. That's in that. So that's when it started.
Mm.
And as far as why I love it, it's such a privilege to be able to write. I love getting just a little bit better with each book. I mean, that's what I love and also what I hate, because it makes me want to go back and rewrite everything I've ever written. But that sense of progress and that sense of what words can do, it's a privilege. And I also think that if you get that tap on the shoulder that you think you should write, then I think you should. It's kind of what Deb was saying.
Mhm.
When people ask me quite often, how do you come up with your ideas? Or, gee, I've always wanted to write a book. It's not easy. I would never say that this is a walk in the park kind of career. But if somebody wants to wrestle with this particular dragon, it's very, very worthwhile, in terms of personal growth and a
Mhm.
lot of other things. So what do you think are the most either difficult or terrible things about being an author?
I think for me, I enjoy the writing part. The marketing part is not what I
Agreed.
like. It's a thing you have to do, but I'd much rather write the book than try to figure out how to advertise and market the book. And you said something, Mara, that made me think of the rewarding part of writing. When you get an email from somebody, like I've gotten several from people that like are in the hospital or maybe with a loved one in the hospital going through a horrible time, and they'll write and tell me that they read my series while they were there and how much it meant to them to be able to,
That's
escape. And it's like, okay, that's a big plus to being able to do that for someone.
very much
That's
so.
that's happened, in all of our lives. We've escaped into a book when we've needed to. So I think that's a real privilege.
So what do you think, Catherine? The most terrible or the most difficult?
Well, I'm, I guess, what they call a hybrid publisher. So I have had traditionally published books that have done really well in New Zealand and Australia, but that's a very small market. So I got my worldwide rights back for my first 3 books, and dipped my toe into self-publishing. And I did exactly what you just said, Mara, which was rewrite them. And go back and fix all the things that I no longer like. And I dipped my toe into self-publishing about 4 years ago. just to really see what it involved. And then my romance is published by what they call a digital first publisher, which is they effectively treat they market and do all the things as if you were self-published without you actually having to do them, which is kind of great. But so I agree with Tammy on the sort of like the hardest thing is building a profile, attracting readers, especially if your books like mine have been in just one little country. So going worldwide is a tough, it's a tough thing to be able to sort of break through. But I don't know. I've had this massive battle with Kindle lately. I won't go and bore you with the
Mm,
hideous Kafka-esque nature of my interactions with KDP. Um, but I've won. I'm out there,
in the
and
end, in
I'm
there.
self-publishing a new series which is coming out soon. And that is I'm determined now. I think after that battle to do all those things like the marketing and learn the how to work that hideous Amazon ads dashboard and just kind of build a profile and build a newsletter and do all the things that you're supposed to do that I sincerely have not done up till now.
Mm,
But that is the hardest part. It's absolutely the
mm,
hardest part. It's like being a business person as well as a writer, and I just want to be a writer,
Mhm.
yeah,
forced to be a business person.
yeah, yeah, we are. We are. And I don't really, there are, I guess, maybe three ways of being published now. There's the traditional, there's the self,
Mm.
and there's indie. At least that's what we call it in the States. And independent publishing is hybrid. And it's the best of both worlds for my money because you are working with a professional team. So you've got people who are brilliant at interior design and cover design and social media and all those things that you have to do. Um, you're basically in control of them. You're guiding the whole process, and you have a lot to say about your branding, and you end up with a higher percentage at the end of the day than you would with traditional. I think, for me, I was coming out of a radio series which had a brand, and most of the offers that came from traditional publishers wanted to trash that and make up something of their own. But I kept saying, I've got 4.5 million listeners who are familiar with this. Why would you get rid of that? People work years to get that much of a foundation. And so that was sort of a push me, pull you, until I found the right paradigm for publishing. It's a challenge, but it's also so satisfying when you get that number one on Amazon. Was it last year, Tammy, or maybe the year before? Um, we were trading places, number one and number two, and number two and number one, and number one on Amazon for like a few days. And so we were emailing each other, congratulations. No, congratulations to you. It was really fun.
Fun.
And I know how hard we both worked, to get there.
Mhm.
So what is your writing process? And I mean, we could obviously do several hours on this, but like, do you have a special time of day, a dedicated writing space? Is just sort of speak for a moment about your time and space as an author.
I want to hear from Deb because she's got a whole dairy farm to run as well as write. How do you fit that in?
I am not as dedicated to writing as I would like to be. My farm business comes first. So I do the book work for three companies, plus our own books. And then when my desk is clear for that, then I write. And usually my writing process is when I go to bed, I walk through the scene that I'm on. So I do the dialogue, the action where they are, and I don't lose it because I've thought of it before I go to sleep. And so if I have the chance the next day, whether it's morning or last thing at night, I write it out. I get that scene done. So that is how I process. But I have tried like for November to take the whole month off just to write 50,000 words for NaNoWriMo.
NaNoWriMo, yeah.
And I get so far behind in my office work that it's more of a punishment than anything. So that's my problem. I'm not I'm not able to write every day, but when I can, I make the most of it.
Would you say you're an outliner or a pantser?
Oh, I'm a pantser. I'm
Pantser.
not like you, Mara.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that term, writing by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, I'm a pantser, always have been. I think I tried to write something at once about the characters, and it didn't go very far.
Got it. Well, you have a system that works for
It
you.
works, it works. So
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it may be slow, but it's not broken.
It's not. I mean, you're doing two series. It's fantastic. So, what about you, Catherine?
I'm sort of dedicated. Basically, if I set myself a deadline, and I know what my average word count is in a day, so I work out how long it's going to take me to get to the book word limit. And I honestly I map it out in the calendar. I give myself a reasonable amount of time and add a little bit more so I don't actually go insane if things go wrong. Um, and it's like do all the work at the last minute while crying kind of thing. I try to avoid that.
Yes.
Yeah. And but I treat it when I'm properly sitting down to write, I do treat it like a job. So I'll get some things out of the way, try to get out of my pajamas, don't always succeed. We'll write for about 3 hours, maybe from 8:30 in the morning, get out, do life things, and probably write for another 3 hours in the afternoon. And then dogs need walking and things like that.
Wow, that's a
So
lot.
I try to write 4 to 6 hours a day. And I try not to beat myself up if I can't do it, because hopefully I've left enough fat in the schedule for me, or schedule, to be able to do that, make it work. So, but I'm quite dedicated and focused when I sit down to write.
And are you an outliner or a pantser?
Oh, it depends. So it depends on the book. So the Gabriel's Bay books are effectively 6 characters, and they all have their own stories, and the stories interlink into one sort of cohesive novel. And it just about drove me insane to do the first one, because I was more of a pantser. So I had to get a whole bunch of post-it notes and basically like write out what their stories were, and then sort of put them up on a big piece of paper and work it out from there. So that was my outlining. For the romances, I kind of have, as you said about romance does have these expectations and
Yeah.
these kind of beats that you should hit. So I kind of know what those are, and then I kind of pants my way between them, if you like.
Yeah. So it's sort of a hybrid, but again, a
I am a
system that
hybrid.
works
Yeah.
for you. Yeah. What about you, Tammy?
I tend to write best, do my best work early in the morning. I get up pretty early, and so I start writing. And like you, Catherine, I probably target, 4 at least hours a day, more like 6 usually. And I try to write every day. I might not do as much on a certain day if I have an appointment or something like that, but I try really hard to do that. And to me, it's kind of like a muscle. You kind of have to work it all the time, and then it gets easier, I think, if you actually do it every day. Um, it's not as, I don't feel looking back, it's easier for me to write now that I've written more books. It seems like it does get easier with each of them. The flow, they go faster and they flow easier. So I think it's kind of like an exercise deal for me. And then I tend to write. I was thinking when you asked that, I'm like I envy writers that can go and take their laptop and sit wherever and write, or go to the coffee shop and write. And that is not me. I have to write in my home office on a desktop with a real keyboard. I cannot I cannot do the laptop thing. But for plotting and thinking and character development and things like that, yeah, I do actually most of that on paper. I really like to start with a pen and paper. And I don't know why. There's just something. I read an article about that, how it's like your brain does something when you write with a pen and paper. And So most all of my books, I have these notebooks and I just keep all these ideas and that's how I start is on pen and paper. And then once I have the character fleshed out and I'm more of an outliner, I'm more of a planner. I say I'm a plantster because I tend to have an outline, but you kind of go off sometimes. But and then like my mysteries, very much an outline. They're more they're more plot driven than character driven. So you really have to have an order to things, I think, more in a mystery than you
I do
do
too.
in
Yeah,
romance
mystery
fiction.
requires, yeah, very, very
Yeah.
structured. Yeah. For me, once again, I have bits and pieces of what each of you has said. Of course, the series started as an adaptation, so it's a little bit different. I had a show Bible, and so I had detailed fact sheets about each character and, carried that forward. That was useful when I found my editor, because that was a way for her to get caught up with the
Mm.
whole series. And once I have a sense of the beats that need to happen in a given story, which has to happen in my office, then I can go to a cafe and write a scene. And sometimes that's helpful. The I'm not surrounded by the temptations of all the other things I'm supposed to be doing. I all I can do in that cafe is drink my latte and write my scene. And that's helpful
Right.
sometimes. But again, we arrive at a process and we have to create a structure that will have us continue. And I totally agree, Tammy. You get better by exercising this muscle and
Mhm.
there's a flow about it. And once that flow starts, it's actually hard to stop,
Mhm.
which is just, great. I'm a little bit early with my new book. And so I'm rolling right on into the next one, rather than saying, oh, I can take a break.
Yeah.
No, it's better to,
Better to go.
use that energy and flow on, into the next. So where can people find your wonderful books?
I'm on Amazon and through my website.
Best place to look for me is probably on Amazon. My romance series is wide. Everything else is Amazon and KU. Unless you're in New Zealand, in which case you can go to the library and pretty much find everything
Mhm.
there at the moment.
That's good.
I'm the same. You can search me on Amazon, and most of my books are in Kindle Unlimited. And you can also visit my website, tammylgrace.com, and learn all about them.
And we will post end cards at the end for our followers who are, visual. They'll be able to write down our website addresses and how to reach us if you would like. Let me just ask, are all of you also on audio?
I'm
I've
not, I would love to be.
Okay.
I've got the romances, the Flora Valley romances are all on audio, and my very first Gabriel's Bay book is on audio as well.
Okay. And is this Audible?
Audible, as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Tammy?
Yes, in fact, I just worked with a publisher to do my Sisters of the Heart, the one with the foster mom and sisters, and the first one just came out this week. So they're
Great.
to publish all of those, and they're also publishing all of my mysteries. So they're coming out over the next few months. They'll be out. So
Oh,
yes, and I'm
excellent.
on Audible.
Excellent. Um, all my books are on Audible, except those that aren't quite ready yet, but they eventually will be. But audio is a particular favorite of mine, obviously coming out of doing radio drama. Um, and I still have a wonderful engineer I've worked with for years, so enjoy the audios. So, anybody have a final word they would like to share?
I just this is my medium for when I'm on holiday. I write on my phone. Um,
Really?
I discovered that my phone came with a pen or a stylus the last time I was in the Caribbean, and I wrote 3 or 4 chapters poolside. Didn't worry about spelling, just typed away. And on my flight home from our cruise 2 years ago, I wrote my airplane scene because I didn't have paper, but I had my phone. So, I mean, use whatever you have.
Yes, that's very good advice.
When the idea hits you, use whatever, and you never know what you'll come up with.
You know, to that point, if I'm on a longer drive and something comes, I dictate,
Yeah.
the scene and then transcribe it when I get home. Yeah, because you must be obedient to the muse. You can't assume those things will come again.
I find that we were talking about the flow, and I think once you start that creative generation process, it's kind of like a mill wheel, isn't it? And it just gets faster and faster. And I know I have to take the dogs for a walk, but it's still going in my head. And it's the most frustrating thing because I have 2 dogs, and so I've got 2 hands full. And I have to just keep repeating things in my head so I don't forget it until I come home. It's ridiculous.
Maybe you need a special.
I know. I should get a dictation thing set up when I'm walking the dog.
Right.
People will think I'm insane unless they think I'm talking to the dogs.
Pair
I
of
guess.
dogs, yeah.
Yeah. Any final thought, Tammy?
No, I can't think of anything exciting. I just, it's been real fun to get to know both Catherine and Deb.
Isn't this fun? This is
Yeah.
so
It is.
delightful. I feel
Very
like
fun.
such a global citizen.
Lots of
And
fun.
I really appreciate your time, each of you, and I wish you the very, very best with your series. And I hope that this gets, more readers for each of us.
That would be wonderful.
Nice.
It would be wonderful.
Right.
Thank you so much, Mara.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.